12 of Conan Lovecraftian villains explored in detail. As much as we'd like Conan to be addressed as Conan the Barbarian, we think he is a lot more than just that, and referring to him simply as a barbarian kind of limits the esteem that his character truly deserves.
Conan, what is best in life? To crush your enemies? See them driven before you?
A 1932 creation of the American author Robert E. Howard, one who was looked upon as the father of the sword and sorcery subgenre, the character of Conan continues to exist till date. Older to every DC and Marvel superhero out there, a highly skilled warrior, downright chivalrous, and most importantly, the true alpha of the Hyborian Universe. Full credits to Howard for whipping up a spectacularly new era of fictional history, aka the Hyborian Age. Mind you, Conan is no superhuman, but his proficiency in martial arts, along with that smoldering, brutish, brawny appearance, is a living proof of the fact that he has had quite a lengthy list of enemies to raise his sword against. Speaking of villains, it goes without saying that Conan categorically has had many who have been worthwhile challenges, and in today's video, we are going to stress on 12 of Conan's Lovecraftian villains, explaining them and their backstories in detail. You better be ready for this.
Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin.
Who will not face emptiness? Infidel!
Thulsa Doom. While it is out and out difficult to disregard one of America's most distinguished and versatile actors, James Earl Jones, to be more precise, essaying the role of Thulsa Doom in John Milius's 1982 epic sword and sorcery movie, Conan the Barbarian. The origin of his character goes way back. He was first introduced by the late Robert E. Howard as Thulsa Doom in the short story Delcardis's Cat. The title later changed to The Cat and the Skull. Howard described him as someone with a face that resembled a white skull with eye sockets that literally glowed. Mind you, before his encounter with Conan the Barbarian, he was the arch nemesis to Kull of Atlantis. No wonder Doom as the powerful, pitiless, undead sorcerer has surely come a long way, and it is a given thing that his character has had different versions.
That is strength, boy. That.
Taking a look at the 1982 movie, the pre-production sketches of his character did show Thulsa Doom with a similar skull-like face, but in the movie, he is more like the typical Conan villain Tataman, or in other words, servant of the serpent god, Set. And while he has the appearance of a regular-looking human in the film, he is said to have survived for about 1,000 years, and also boasts this particular power to change into a colossal snake. The film shows him more like an authoritative cult leader, having an excessive command over his followers. So much so that his followers even went to extremes of obeying his orders to commit suicide.
Come to me, my child.
Putting further stress on his powers and abilities, one of Doom's most recognized skills happens to be shape-shifting, one that makes him capable of taking countless identities. His primary goals were to kill Conan, in fact, kill anyone for that matter who stood against him and rule the world. The sole fact that this tyrannical lich participated in dark magic and played around elements of oppression, brainwashing, tyranny, and mass murders easily made him one of Conan's top villains. Well, it surely was a delight when Conan was finally able to avenge the death of his parents by beheading Doom, and it was only after his death that all his followers finally got themselves liberated from his oppressive mind control.
This dimension belongs to me now!
Shumacherath. Okay, so this villain right over here has his connections with the Marvel Universe, sharing a rather particularly hostile relationship with Doctor Strange. But if the question and concern is about his origins, we have to go way back. Honestly, not much is known about his origins, but what's known for a fact is that he is a prehistoric alien deity, one with a penchant for human sacrifices. Apparently, he was exiled by a time-traveling sorcerer known as Siseneg. Well, of course, he came back centuries later, started ruling Earth again, it'd relish on the sacrifices. But with the new age came the new Hyborian god Crom, who made use of the iron-bound books of Shumacherath to confine the demon on a mountain. But with him being nearly invincible, and his level of power being far beyond the grasp of human understanding, Shumacherath, whilst being trapped inside the mountains, was able to utilize his mental powers and influence the sorcerer Conan into setting him free. Thank God for Conan that he had a nightmare, one that revolved around Shumacherath. Post having being able to feel the effects of his sinister plans, Conan enlisted the help of Crom, and using the very books, the duo was able to send the power-hungry cosmic entity back into his home dimension. By now, it is a known fact that Shumacherath boasts abilities that are literally limitless, from being able to regenerate himself, having on display shape-shifting abilities, to producing energy within himself, and absorbing all kinds of energy around him. He is quite skilled at manipulating a variety of attacks. Then there is levitation, teleportation, phasing, and the fact that he can very easily travel through different dimensions at his own will. That's not even all. He can further communicate via telepathy and also influence others, and for that, he does not have to be in the same realm. There's something about his essence that alone can annihilate many galaxies, and to top it, this Lord of Chaos can also generate a ball of energy, one that can destroy almost everything both within a dimension and universe for that matter. When it comes to his own world, he is the most supreme being. Having vanquished a multitude of realities, the dreaded Shumacherath is actually the ruler of the Lovecraftian eldritch gods, or entities that are addressed as the many-angled ones. In short, one has every reason to watch out for this ruler of hundreds of dimensions.
Sacred flame, protect us from the cold!
Akivasha.
Why worry for tomorrow when we know our destiny tonight?
Now, who on earth, in their sane minds, will be able to resist this? From initially being a minor antagonist in Robert E. Howard's 1935 Conan story, The Hour of the Dragon, the character of Akivasha made it as the primary antagonist in John Nicola's 1997 fantasy flick, Kull the Conqueror. In case you didn't know, the movie was more like a loose adaptation of The Hour of the Dragon, and Akivasha's character in the film bore resemblance to Zath. After all, both of them were ancient, mummified evil sorcerers who were resuscitated by conspirators to defeat the hero. Going back to history, Akivasha's name is taken from the Egyptian name Akivasha for the Achaeans. Akivasha was the Stygian princess for over 10,000 years, who ultimately came to reside in the Temple of Set in Kemi, which was the capital of Stygia. There she roamed around in the shadows and lived off the priests, magicians, and even virgins that were caught and brought to her. Conan had his first encounter with Akivasha when he visited the Temple of Set, looking for the heart of Rathamon. No points for guessing that he was absolutely mesmerized by her beauty and actually thought of her to be an innocent maiden. He even followed her when she told him that she would take him to the sorcerer Thutothimis, who apparently held the heart. But it was only after they were inside her chambers and she tried seducing him that Conan could understand her real nature. He also did find her sarcophagus vacant, but by then Akivasha had already enchanted him with her story and had further plans of making him as her own forever. But it was only after she bit his neck that Conan was able to come out of her spell, and he flung her away. He even took out his sword and told her that he'd chop her into 2 pieces if she even had the slightest thought of coming after him again. Please keep this in mind that Akivasha is the only monster that Conan just could not defeat, and to think of, her sweet yet hellish laughter is still capable of haunting one to this very day. Degoth, a member of the second class of demons. Degoth initially served as a servant to Shumacherath. You will be surprised to know that he was also worshipped as a high priest within the city of Kalumish. Don't believe us? Well, apparently, the inhabitants of Kalumish fulfilled every need of Degoth and also carried out sacrifices for him. It's a different thing that the entire city collapsed. And sank underneath the sea. Of course, he resurfaced but was eventually banished to an unnamed dimension by the powerful sorcerer Dr. Strange. In the 1984 epic sword and sorcery flick, Conan the Destroyer, Degoth is addressed as the Dreaming God and appears to be worshipped by the people of Shadizar. As the movie dives a little into the history, it is seen that many years before mankind, Degoth lost his source of power, his jeweled horn, while fighting against a war with the other gods. As a result, he crumbled, fell to earth, and turned into a handsome statue, one with a hole in the forehead. Centuries later, when the horn was placed back into the forehead of Degoth's statue, the resurrected god transformed into a huge, hideous, horned reptilian beast, boasting superhuman strength, endurance, and the ability to create storms and lightnings. As long as he had the horn in place, he just could not be killed. Even to this very day, it still remains a mystery whether the monstrous form of Degoth happens to be his real self or not. While as a statue, he was perhaps the most good-looking man, one donning an ornate helmet and wearing a sarong, but as a monster, he was gigantic, and that jeweled horn looked more like the tusk of an elephant, or let's say the horn of a rhinoceros. But that's not even the hideous part. His eyes were on the sides of his head, the mouth was filled with razor-sharp teeth, and he could easily open in the sides. He had webbed hands and feet. There were fins on his arms and legs, and he had this enormous lizard-like tail. But the highlight of his look was his open throat, one from where the internal organs were pretty much visible. Conclusively, the character of Degoth was not a very pretty sight. Tataman. Taking all the Stygian sorcerers into consideration, the character of Tataman surpasses them all, and can categorically be regarded as the most powerful, recurring villain in the Conan universe. He is so dangerously terrifying and crooked that even the Lord of Stygia was afraid to cross paths with him. Know this, that he will stop at literally nothing when it comes to gaining sorceress power, and his command over the dark arts is unparalleled. Born to an abusive alcoholic father that coerced him to beg around for money, Tataman knew that life wasn't fair to him since a very young age, and that he had to grasp opportunities even if they didn't come his way. That's why he didn't even hesitate once before crushing his friend Amon's head with a stone, take his place instead and become an acolyte of Ibis, the peaceful Huron god of Stygia. And while he did learn a lot from Ibis, his unquenchable thirst for power as well as greed made him take a leap into the forbidden knowledge. From being tested by the serpent god Set to being restored back to life via the black ring of Set, he started worshipping Set and even executed a multitude of sacrifices. So much so that he was crafty enough to put the entire blame on his mentor for all of his actions. In due course, he secured an exceedingly powerful position of leadership in Stygia, with endless spells and rituals at his disposal. He could even summon other Stygians to aid him in reaching his goals. Imagine someone so powerful that he can command beasts, snakes and insects to be more precise. We are not kidding when we tell you that he has the power to call upon creatures to do what he wants them to do. The character of Tataman bears a lot of resemblance to the dark god that he worships. He is a schemer, more like a strategist, just like Set, and often ambushes his enemies from far via tactics and taking advantage of their weakness. One of his most favorite things is to corrupt one's allies and use them against each other, so you can imagine how cunning he actually is. No wonder his manipulations have threatened Conan's life, not just in one instance, but many. While he did make an appearance in the movie Conan the Destroyer, his wrath on display was of a much lesser degree. Zath. You know it's going to be a powerful villain when it's spiders that we are talking about, and not just any, but a giant one. Say hello to Zath, who was worshipped in Yezud, the city of the spider god, back in the Hyborian era. In fact, the priests of Zath raised herds of cattle for it and even built up a colossal statue in its honor. The highlight of the statue was the fact that it had 8 treasured gems instead of its eyes. Zath, in due course, had countless children which were raised by the priests to serve more like an army to take control of the land of Zamora. Conan encountered Zath in Yezud while he was trying to get rid of a bounty on his head. It is precisely then that he got to know about the offsprings of Zath, and he was successful in defeating one of them when he crossed paths. In the meantime, Conan fell for one of the dancers called Rudebe, who aided him in hiding inside the temple. But it was in the very basement of the temple he faced Zath. Battling the giant spider was pointless, and Zath was brutal enough to kill Rudebe when it heard her looking for Conan later. Things did not seem to initially eventually work out in favor of Conan, no matter what he did to escape Zath. He eventually landed himself into the den of Zath's children. It was only after he managed to set the basement on fire that Zath simply burst through the walls of the temple, attempting to escape. Conan ended up throwing numerous lit torches on its back, something that Zath was not able to put out, and instead wriggled in pain. The end result led to Zath toppling the temple, and in the process trapping the remaining offsprings, who by then were already weakened. That's how the monstrous Zath and his children met their end. Rathamon. Meet this exceedingly powerful wizard, who happens to be the primary antagonist of Conan the Adventurer. For those who are unaware, Rathamon was the head of the snake cult, one that comprised of serpent men, or in other words, humanoid snakes who served Set. The merciless and hungry for power wizard was initially a huge Gila monster, who was transformed into a serpent man by Rathamon, his predecessor.
Now answer me this creature, whom do you serve?
I serve you, master.
It should not come as a surprise to you at all when we say that Rathamon did take his vengeance on Rathamon by taking possession of his black ring of power and eventually taking control of this snake cult. And God, he was evil, cruel, and categorically crooked. He's known for his mood swings, the occasional threats, and the fact that he would literally scream if his plans don't go according to him. To begin with, he made sure Conan knew about him when he turned the latter's parents along with his grandfather into stone. It goes without saying that the duo became exceedingly hostile against each other, and Conan made up his mind to overthrow Rathamon and break the spell. Putting further stress on the goals of the villain here, Rathamon yearned to put an end to Conan and his men, take possession of their star metal weapons, and utilize them to release Set from the abyss. And while Rathamon was able to fulfill his aim, he still got overthrown when Conan got the better of him by destroying the Black Ring, breaking the spell, freeing his parents, and having Rathamon returned back to his original form. It is also said that Rathamon was presumably slayed later by Rathamon for betraying him. Razorl. Well, if there is any villain out there that actually proved himself to be competent enough and more like a match for Conan, then credits have to be given to Razorl, also known as the Devourer of Souls. If we go back to history, Razorl was an ancient god, one who existed way before man did. Apparently, he was summoned by a cult that was completely devoted to him. But here's the twist. The cult accidentally ended up summoning another being, one that was known as the Destroyer of Worlds, all at the same time. Post-comprehending the fact that his own world would be the target of the Destroyer, Razorl ended up eating the souls of his very cult, accumulate enough strength and power to kill his rival, even if that meant his own death. Of course, he was revived back later by the Council of Seven, who were more like a human association of wizards. Razorl repaid them back for their service by killing 7 apostles for the council post, after which he started going around the world looking for more power and more souls to consume. Eventually, he ended up crossing paths with Conan, and after a long, exhausting battle that Conan was able to kill his demonic form. That was not the end of Razorl. He awoke, but as a human on a beach, and later teamed up with the fire demon Zath for many more escapades. Speaking of this villain's powers and abilities, he appears as a giant humanoid, say about 9 to 10 feet tall, dons a winged helmet, a black mantle, and carries a sword. His character is most recognized for his ability to turn human souls into worms. Yes, you heard that right, and then end up eating them. There's hardly anybody for that matter who was able to fight him. That way, he is quite strong. In fact, the power of the elder gods granted him to reach a height, one that is as huge as a mountain and also boosts his senses. Razorl has definitely been one of those big bad villains to look out for.
Captive in this stone prison, held by the strongest of magic, until the barbarian set him free.
Graven. So what if he is the main villain of the 2007 video game titled Conan? Just do not make the mistake of disregarding him as just a regular antagonist. He is a lot more than that. Graven is the definition of a psychopathic fallen sorcerer, one who simply wants to take control of the world. And it just does not matter the lengths that he has to go to achieve that. He dreads death and will stop at nothing to cheat on it. If we dig a little bit of history, Graven was once a mortal sorcerer of an ancient race, one who safeguarded the mysteries of the most powerful magic, along with his brother Kalden. While both the brothers promised to guard the magic, it was Graven who broke his vow, because he craved for immortality, so much so that he was literally ready to offer his very own children as sacrifice, if that meant him getting closer to what he wanted. In due course, Graven was able to confine the gods of the ancient world within his body, but his lust for power knew no limits. He wanted to recreate the world on his own terms, one where all forms of life will end up serving him, and that too for eternity. So it goes without saying that he ended up utilizing all the power of the gods, but for his own goals. Graven actually went after his own daughter to complete a ritual, believing that would make him obtain true immortality, but before he could do so, he was sealed away in a prison.
In his stony cell, Graven's power had become his prison.
Damn you!
No points for guessing that it was Conan who inadvertently set him free, while he himself was on the lookout for quests and treasures. Graven, post being free, ended up putting a curse on Conan's armor before teleporting him away and spreading the armor all across different parts of the world. Every piece of the armor altered the souls of anyone for that matter who donned the armor into augmented barbarians with phenomenal capabilities, undead abominations, and other supernatural creatures. Conan, being the real owner of the armor, was resistant to the negative effects, and it was post a very long, arduous fight that he was eventually able to shove his sword straight through Graven's chest. But this also resulted in freeing the gods that were once under his control. Angry at what he had done to them, and to teach him a lesson, the gods take away his magic, bring him back with them to their world, and torture him relentlessly, much to his horror for all eternity. Satoguwa, boasting a layer of dark fur and bat-like features such as pointed ears, soul-piercing red eyes, the character of Satoguwa looks more like an obese man. In fact, Lovecraft himself addressed this deity bearing similar physical traits to a pudgy toad, as well as a sleepy sloth, thereby hinting at his sluggish personality. Also known as the Sleeper of Nakai, this Lovecraftian deity made his first appearance in the 26,000-word novella titled The Whisperer in Darkness in 1931. Satoguwa categorically happens to be one of the primary Great Old Ones, and lives in the pitch-black caves of Nakai, along with his boundless infantry of ferociously devoted servants. Wondering who these servants are? Well, they happen to be quite an aggressive race of cave-residing humanoids, each of them boasting a toad-like appearance, in a way similar to their god, from boasting powers of immortality, godlike abilities, control over an entire army of worshipping servants. Satoguwa is quite malefic in nature and just cannot be taken lightly. Master of the Monolith. Truly and heavily inspired by the works of Lovecraft, this hideous, toad-like creature made its debut in Robert E. Howard's short story titled The Black Stone as the primary antagonist. It would not be wrong to say that the Master of Monolith happens to be a personification of humanity's most horrifying attributes: lust, greed, and malice. To top it, this ancient demonic entity was actually worshipped as a deity by a corrupted cult of the Romanian origin within the small mountainous village of Smoldering in Hungary. The cult even went to extents of performing several dreadful rituals at its monolithic altar, which was known as the Black Stone. The rituals had them going into the lowland villages, kidnapping the women as well as children from there, and offering them as sacrifice to the Master of the Monolith. These heinous crimes were carried on for years, till the Turkish soldiers invaded the mountains and conquered the Hungarian people, thus putting a stop to the wrongdoings of the cult. While the tyrannical dark form, along with its detestable beastly worshippers, have long been obliterated, it is still said that there is this one occasion, most probably on the midsummer's night, when its incorporeal self arises from the depths of hell to reveal itself. Conan Gath. Imagine a villain, a wicked sorcerer to be more precise, one who is able to evade death over and over again, and coming back each time way more powerful than before, and wreaking unimaginable terror and havoc on his enemies. That's not enough for you? Okay, so how about getting beheaded, and even having his heart cut from his chest, and still coming back to life? Well, that's Conan Gath for you, a primary villain in both Conan the Barbarian series, as well as Red Sonja series. Conan Gath has also been a part of the Marvel Universe, battling against the Avengers. Avengers, the X-Men, and even Venom for that matter. Putting stress on the Conan series, this villain was a sorcerer in the Hyborian era. He was married to a witch back then and badly wanted to use the power of Shumacherath for himself. After he was killed, his life was restored back to him. As an immortal, he battled Conan but was eventually beheaded by the Barbarian. But that did not stop him from returning back to life yet again. No points for guessing that Gath met his demise at the hands of Shumacherath for trying to control his power. But then again, he was revived 1,000 years later, and that is precisely when his attempts to take control and possession of the modern world began. You must be wondering, what was the secret behind him coming back to life again and again? Well, the powerful sorcerer gained access to immortality by infusing a magical amulet with his life energy. A crafty mastermind and an even more dangerous schemer, his knowledge of magic gave him the capability to go to extremes of twisting reality. It goes without saying that our list would have been incomplete without the mention of this iconic villain here.
And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks, everyone.
Until at last, he found his own kingdom and wore his crown upon a troubled brow.